Welcome to Valufication of Things, your one-stop podcast on the discussion of value, and especially business value. This is a forum where your host, Sri Sundaram, will be discussing topics on how to quantify value for practically any scenario. Along the way, we will have business leaders and subject matter experts describing their value journey. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast episode.
Hello, I'm Sri Sundaram, your host for this episode of the Valufication of Things. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Dr. Sandeep Purral, Trustee Professor and Director of eHub at Bentley University in Greater Boston. Today, we'll be talking about the business value of social good and how it is different from a business value for a for-profit endeavor. In this case, we'll discuss how we approach the value conversation and who do we go speak with. We'll also talk about the introduction of newer disruptive technologies that are supplemented with social media proliferation. Do they help or hinder the value cause for societal good? Sandeep is a researcher, scholar, and a higher education expert whose research areas include design and evaluation of complex techno-organization systems for business and societal problems. His current research interests and projects including managing healthcare information for the elderly, understanding political polarization using data analytics to improve service delivery for the homeless, and knowledge management in organizations. Hello, Sandeep, and welcome to the Valufication of Things.
Thank you, Sri. Look forward to our conversation.
So let's start by defining a couple of terms that are often used and helps us to create a baseline for this conversation, Sandeep. First of all, can you define what is social good? And more specifically, what do you mean by technologies for social good?
Social good or societal good simply means that the outcomes that we are seeking from our work are not just measured in terms of revenue or profits, but also benefits to individuals, communities, and societies. Let's take an example. One can think about outcomes such as clean air, access to healthcare, literacy. You can think about all of these kinds of outcomes. Or you can even make them more specific, such as an example from one of our projects. How do you improve access to targeted services to individuals who might be experiencing homelessness? So when we go down this path, we are talking about using metrics that may be different from revenue or profits. Now, there was a second part, and that was about technologies for social good. We can see technology as something human-made, artificial, something that adds to our environment. It could be the natural environment, the social environment, the organizational environment. So the phrase technologies for social good simply means designing something artificial, a thing, a platform that would add to that environment in such a way that it will contribute to that social good.
Sounds good, Sandeep. You just talked about some of the benefit levers that would potentially be applied in a business case for societal good. Now, in a corporate environment, the benefit levers are more straightforward, right? It's all about increasing revenue, improving profit, improving productivity. And as you rightly said, in a social cause, for greater good, there's a combination of these things. So you mentioned a few of these levers. What are some of the other levers that you look for if you were to list out what you look for in terms of presenting a value case to a stakeholder, perhaps?
So I'm hearing the word levers here. I like the question. It follows up on what we've just discussed. You're right. Absolutely right. We do consider different levers. But before I respond to that, allow me to make a distinction. I see the word levers as strategic actions that would take us down a path to generate that societal value. But I'll use a different word, and the word I'll use is metrics. So how do I measure outcomes such as the ones that you've talked about before? Revenue, profit, productivity. To me, all of these are metrics, and levers are then strategic actions that take us to those metrics. So let's say that we talk about the metrics first. Let's say the societal good that we are interested in is about access to healthcare. You can think about the number of individuals who have access to healthcare and how some technology that we may design would improve that access to more individuals, or it'll improve the quality of that access.
Mhm.
So that would be a metric that one can use, and one can actually measure that. So it'll be something similar to revenue or profit. When we do such calculations, the two examples that I talked about, the number of individuals or the quality of access, you can think about this in terms of scale or depth. And so you can think about such metrics in terms of what the outcomes could be. As an example, in one of our projects, we were designing technology solutions to help people who are intellectually and developmentally challenged, to help them transition from school to work. In that project, we did not seek scale. What we went after was depth. And so the idea was, how do I make more of these opportunities available in a manner that are more easily accessible and defined to these individuals? So that is one example. Now, I do want to come back to the question about levers that you used, right? As I shared, I'm trying to think about these as strategic actions that I can use to achieve those outcomes. And I can think about a couple of ways that I can respond to this. One would be that for any technology that I might design to pursue a societal good, must not be in conflict with the cultural norms of the potential users. So that would be a lever that I have to be pulling hard on to make sure that my solutions might be accepted. Another might be that I do not design this unless I collaborate with the right community partners. So not only is it okay for me to understand what those cultural norms are, I also need to work with people who would help me bring some of those ideas back out into the community and with the right recipients.
That's a great distinction, Sandeep. So what about the cost aspects? What kind of cost do you anticipate in putting a program like this from a community value, societal cost perspective?
Well, there's certainly cost attached to these efforts, right? So we can think about a couple of simple ways to explore that. One would be straightforward. If I'm trying to design a new solution, what do I need to design and build this solution, this technology? What are my CapEx and OpEx implications for what I'm building? So that would be a direct approach to thinking about cost. But I think there's another way that one can look at this. And the other way is to also look at the opportunity cost. So I can say that if I choose to pursue the design of this technology to address a societal good, maybe I have less resources for some other initiatives that are directly aimed at improving revenue. Now, I might also think about a third way. And a third way would be more complementary. So I might wish to go after some of these kinds of initiatives where these initiatives are directly beneficial to other expenditures and other outlays I might have for pathways or directions that are aimed at improving revenue. So it is not just a simple matter of looking at this is the amount I'm spending, but what am I missing and what am I complementing? For example, let's say you're an organization that wants to invest in designing technologies for some societal good. Now, you can think about your own industry sector, and you can think about what your own ESG goals might be. And that will give you some possibilities. Then you can see whether your approach to designing technologies for societal good is in alignment with your mission. And as a part of that discussion, then you can look at not just the cost of designing that technology, but also the opportunity cost and what it might complement within your organization. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you for that clarification. As you rightly pointed out, there are these direct costs that are typically part of these programs. There are a lot of these indirect costs, intangible, some of them, that needs to be taken into account. So let's take a brief break here. When we come back, I'll ask Sandeep, how does he approach the value conversation?
This episode of Valufication of Things is sponsored by Valufy. Valufy is a free tool that allows you to create business value models. Go to valufy.net and click download to begin your valufication journey.
Welcome back. Today we are talking with Sandeep Purao, researcher, scholar, and professor at Bentley University. We talked about the business value of societal causes. He defined for us what social good means. He discussed what the benefit levers are in the context of a non-profit but community-oriented value scenarios. In this segment, we'll talk about how to begin that value conversation. Who are the stakeholders and how do we approach them? Is there a particular time when it's more opportune to talk to them? Finally, we'll also talk about the influence of social media and newer disruptive technologies, whether they help or hurt the cause. So welcome back, Sandeep.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this question. You talked earlier about the breadth of the value versus the depth of the value. So in this case, how do you approach the value conversation? If it's a business, I know where to go. I would normally go to the CFO, the CEO, and the C-suite leaders to begin the value journey. In a non-profit scenario, a societal good scenario, who will you approach and how? Does your modus operandi change?
Good set of questions. What we've been discussing so far is tied to this value conversation. Allow me to add one nuance to this. We are using the word value. Let me introduce the term values. We often think about value in terms of financial gain, returns. On the other hand, when we say values, we are talking about things that matter to us, as in these are our values. When we do that, we convince ourselves and others of whichever societal good we are pursuing. Our values might convince us of the importance of outcomes such as access to healthcare, financial literacy, gender equality, and so on. So it is those values that are more important sometimes than the value. So that's one critical distinction that I would make. So with that in mind, let's consider a couple of simple steps to think about the value conversation. Whether you're a researcher like me, and I call myself then an organization of one, or a small business, or a large corporate entity, that conversation has to start with your values, what you believe in, and then move to the possibilities. So we can look at a couple of frameworks from more of a business or corporate perspective. You can look at CSR, you can look at ESG, and in particular, CSR is more closely aligned with the ideas that we are talking about here and the decisions that you will make.
Can you explain quickly for our listeners and viewers, Sandeep, what CSR and ESG is?
ESG, environmental social governance, is the idea that when a business engages in its activities, it is paying attention to the impacts it would have on those domains. CSR is corporate social responsibility. Here, the organization is saying that I am a corporate citizen, we are a corporate citizen, and we wish to do something more than just running our business. We are responsible because we are a citizen in the larger society. And so this idea of values that we are looking at is something that is more closely aligned when an organization considers its social responsibility and how to operationalize that, right? So from there, we will still need to approach the same individuals like a C-suite person, a CFO, etc., right? The same roles, Sri, that you might consider. But the conversation can also focus on how your efforts are aligned with the organizational mission and the values your initiatives are going to subscribe to. When you go down that path, that's when you get to bring in other things, which we have talked about before, such as the metrics that we discussed earlier. How many individuals or communities does it benefit? The cost considerations, the scale and the depth of what you are trying to build, and how all of these things are aligned with your mission. And particularly when you go back to the cost conversation, the points we discussed about the opportunity cost and the complementarity are the pieces that one would add to this conversation. It is no longer a conversation that is purely based on here are the inputs and here are the outputs, but needs to touch upon many of these. I would say the MO is similar. How you need to operationalize this will have to be refined in terms of the details and the message.
So is there a particular time when a conversation such as this is more appropriate than others? Do this at the onset of your idea, or do you go for a little bit of a prototype and then do it? When do you do it?
So you probably can guess my answer here. If you have the luxury, a conversation like this needs to be ongoing. You just need to keep doing it all the time. Because this is not necessarily a conversation about a particular project or a particular initiative. When you think about the idea of a value proposition, you can tie this very specifically to a project. The moment we make the transition from value to values, there is a bigger conversation. And that conversation needs to be ongoing. So that's the first part of the answer. I realize that such a conversation may not be at the top of your agenda for each meeting, but this conversation and this consideration of a set of values will need to be considered and revisited often. It is not a one-time conversation. Sometimes it will be tied to specific projects or initiatives that you might be thinking about. You might be thinking about designing a specific technological solution for a specific problem. In that case, you will need to go deeper and use terms that we have used before, such as what are the specific metrics? How do you measure those metrics? What might be the costs? Is there a cost outlay? And what might be some ways of showing the benefits, not only in terms of the opportunities, but also complementarities? The value conversation is something that one needs to be ongoing. And second, when it comes to specific projects, needs to be tied to these considerations that we have discussed.
So as we wind up this conversation, let me ask you one final question. Given the vast proliferation of social media these days, and the introduction of disruptive technologies such as Gen AI and others, do they help your cause or do they hinder your cause, or is it in between?
One might say that the technology platforms that you have talked about, such as social media, AI, etc., are inherently value neutral. When different social media platforms were used in different parts on different parts of the planet to pursue initiatives such as the Arab Spring, you can see that there were reasons why they were beneficial. On the other hand, today, if you think about the manner in which social media are being used, they feed a lot of misinformation and disinformation. It is not the technology platforms per se, but how you design new solutions using those technology platforms. Earlier in our conversation, we talked about the notion of values. Those need to be front and center when you design new solutions using those technology platforms. So in a number of different disciplines, engineering, information technologies, information systems, people have talked about this idea of front-loading values and ethics. One should not consider the idea of values and ethics after you have designed something simply to assess how things are working. But you should front-load these considerations to make the right decisions about how to design these technologies. So a direct answer to your question is that it is neither here or there, not a positive or a negative, but it is what you bring to that conversation. Just a few months ago, there were calls to stop the development of ChatGPT-like technologies, LLM and others. I believe from what I am listening to now, at the World Economic Forum, AI was at the top of the list. And people are no longer making those calls to stop development. People are saying that you have significant benefits here, and let's not pull back. Let's find a way to apply these technologies in the right manner. Let's get back to those values. What are those values that drive us as humanity? And find a way to incorporate those in the decisions that we make for designing new solutions using those technology platforms.
Very well articulated there, Sandeep. Thank you for time today. Appreciate your willingness to come on this podcast and share your expertise in business value for societal good. I certainly enjoyed listening to your insight and look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you, Sri. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. More often than not, when somebody like me pursues technologies for societal good, we just do it. Your questions made me think about the value conversation much more deeply. That's well appreciated. Thank you.
So thank you for watching this episode. Today, we had Sandeep Rao, trustee professor at Bentley University, who works on complex techno-organizational systems for societal problems. We talked about societal good, how to measure its value, and who the stakeholders are. We also talked about the value conversation and how in this case it differs from that in corporate environments. In future episodes, we'll continue to dwell on the valuification of things with other industry thought leaders and executives. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Valufication of Things. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, please share this episode with your friends and family, and don't forget to leave a review. We're always looking for ways to improve and bring in the best content possible. If you want to be featured on this podcast, please drop us a line at podcast@valufication.com.